You know what it looks like when that student comes in the first day or when they come and interview with you and they're just so excited and they just can't wait. And they get to their first clinical and it's like, oh, I'm out of that classroom. This is why I want to be a PT, right? So we've got to make sure that is a message that keeps coming through loud and clear. The patient stories, but also our stories and how rewarding a career physical therapy is, and the payback that we get, that it's not measurable in ways that we often measure.
Hi, I'm Lori Tyne Brody, and I'm a physical therapist at UW Health Science Drive Medical Center in Madison, Wisconsin, and a professor at Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions. And I am here with my younger sister to do yet another recording of Did You Know? And we've got some fascinating stuff for you today.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I'm Jill Thein-Nissenbaum. I am the younger sister. I am a physical therapist. I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the Department of Family Medicine. I teach them musculoskeletal courses and a sports elective. And my clinic appointment is with the Badgers, which may serve as a little bit of a sticking point with our guest today.
Ooh, yeah.
We'll see how that goes. But we're happy to be here.
We are happy to be here. And today we're going to dive into leadership. So we're doing this podcast on issues related to physical therapy, research, clinical practice, and leadership. And today we are focusing on leadership. Being leaders, how to become a leader, what makes a great leader. So did you know that APTA has a tremendous number of resources to facilitate and mentor future leaders? So it has a leadership scholars program, which is an investment in our profession and our future.
Absolutely.
Yep. There's a 1-year program that you can participate in that runs from January through December, where they have really a robust curriculum that covers a number of opportunities, group projects, engagements, and you'll have a new understanding of skills, personal leadership that you can use to develop yourself as a leader and the profession.
Absolutely. That's one of many ways that you can improve your leadership skills within APTA. The other one is the LAMP program, which stands for Leadership, Advocacy, Management, and Practice. And this is offered through the APTA Academy of Leadership and Innovation, which is one of our newer academies within APTA. It's one of the many programs offered by them, and they offer advanced education and tools to elevate therapists towards leadership roles in healthcare.
And did I interrupt you?
That's okay. You always
do.
Go ahead.
I know. We get along that way. And the last thing is the American Council of Academic Physical Therapy, which is sort of the academic leadership program, which you're probably involved in. And it helps all stakeholders in leadership in the physical therapy academics, which our guest has a foot in all those camps. So
she has so many irons and so many fires and a hand in this and a hand in that. And, I read Susan's CV and I was like, I thought I knew Susan well. I mean, if we could pick another sister, we would probably pick Susan Appling.
Yeah.
But there were so
I'd take that role.
Okay, great, wonderful. I think you'd be the middle sister.
You'd be in between us.
Yes, exactly. So we'd welcome you to the family.
Well, I'm middle in my family, so that works out really well.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, we are delighted to have Susan Appling with us today. And for those of you who don't know Susan Appling, which is probably not very many people, everybody knows Susan. She has been engaged in the APTA. She's been engaged in the chapters level at Ohio and in the Tennessee level. And she's served in so many roles, including most recently the vice president of the APTA. She's been very involved in APTA Orthopedics, and in some of her activities include service on program and educational committees. She's served as the editor for Orthopedic Physical Therapy Practice. She's been on the board of directors and vice president. I think that might be where I first met you, with JOSPT. She's a professor in a clinical track at the Ohio State University DPT program. Yeah.
I know that was hard, Jill.
It was. I had to take a breath. It's okay. And she's been involved in physical therapy education for many years, not only at the Ohio State, but also in the state of Tennessee. So Susan and her wife, Kim, are the parents of 2 young adult children, both of whom are college students.
And on the personal side, she likes to travel to new places. And when she does, she likes to see the local sites and the churches, and guess what denomination the church is.
Right.
So as people who grew up 12 years of Catholic school, we would love to hear more about that.
Yes.
But she's also a diehard Harry Potter fan and
Right.
loves all things Harry Potter and Hogwarts. And I'm a big fan of the pensieve. I feel like someone who does teaching spends their heads like a pensieve, and students are always like trying to stick their head in yours and see everything inside.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So what's your favorite Harry Potter movie?
Oh, it's hard to say the first one because it's the first one and it's just so good and sweet and opens up this whole new door. But beyond that, I really like Order of the Phoenix, I think.
Okay. All right.
And just because it's the one kind of in the middle of kind of moving along the continuum of, it's a kid's film to maybe not a kid's film so much.
Right, exactly.
And of course the books are way better than the movies, but
always
I've read them.
always
I've read them. I've done the audiobooks. I've seen them all. I mean, my daughter walked in the other day and Harry Potter was on television and she said, every time I come home, it's either Harry Potter or Pitch Perfect, or I can't remember the third one, Bones, the series Bones. Those are the three things that are often kind of on in the background, So anyway, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I was there not when they were released at midnight on Thursdays, but I was there on the matinee on Friday afternoon for every movie.
Of course, it's so good. I love like on a holiday when they have the Harry Potter
series,
the mania all day long, and they just roll one right after another. So we always like to start with a little quiz question, and we're hoping you can answer this.
Right.
So,
I'll
what's
do my
the
best.
most important quality of a great leader? You go, Jill.
So, A, they make tough decisions under pressure. B, they lead by example and build trust. C, they know how to mute themselves and keep smiling during Zoom meetings before yelling at their dog or child. D, all of the above.
Well, I would say D, all of the above for sure.
We learned from the first one not to pick C anymore.
Exactly.
We've been told it's always C.
Exactly. So. And Susan really emulates all of this.
Oh, yeah,
she really,
absolutely.
Thank you. Describes her to a T.
Yeah. So it seems like you've been involved in leadership at a number of different arenas. You have a history of state positions, national positions. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got there. Did you see that trajectory from the get-go?
I hoped it would be there. But I grew up in this interesting situation. My parents were both engaged in local, state kind of politics and community. So I remember as a child going around West Memphis, Arkansas, where I grew up, and knocking on doors and putting signs up and handing out flyers, canvassing the neighborhood is what we call it now, right? But I remember doing that for Bill Alexander and Bill Clinton and Senator Ingram, all the folks, because some were from West Memphis, some weren't. Mr. McHouston, I mean, all of them. I was a page when I was in the 6th grade at the Arkansas State House. My sister and I were pages. She was 4 years older than me. And so that was a lot of fun. And then, so I got the bug kind of early. For a long time, I thought I wanted to be an attorney, and I'm telling my age, but during the bicentennial of the United States, I recognized that at the turn of the century, I would be the appropriate age to run for president, and I was going to be the first president of the United States as a woman president as the United States. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. And my dad was involved in his trade association. He was president of his National Trade Association. My parents were state vice presidents for the Arkansas JCs and JSETs. Now it's all just JCs, but it's a community service organization. And so I saw leadership in my parents on different levels, and then not just like in our community and in our church, our community, but also in other ways and professionally. And so it's like, well, that's just what you do, right? That's just what people do. And so that's how I grew up, thinking that's what you do. And I knew I always wanted to get involved. I thought it would be politics. It's a different kind of politics, right? But I thought I'd get involved in that way. And so I grew up being student council president in this position and that position. I was freshman class president in college, and I was the second woman president of the Student Government Association at my college, Christian Brothers University. One of my suite mates the year before was the first woman president. The school it's a Catholic college, and it was all boys until the mid to late 70s. And so, to have a woman president, we had 3 in a row.
That's amazing.
So I just kind of came up doing that. And by the time I got to PT school, you think, oh, were you class president? No. I was like, I'm taking a break. Because, you do all these things. It's like, no, I'm going to PT school and I'm just going to do PT school. So it's really funny because when I got out and I got involved in our district, our Tennessee Physical Therapy Association, now APTA Tennessee, I got involved in the district. And I remember one of my faculty members, both of you know him, Bill Bandy. He's
God.
Yeah. Bill started teaching about 6 months before I started school. So, we go way back. But I remember him saying, what are you doing? Because I ran for secretary like the first year. And that's the year I learned that I'm not a secretary. That's not my best role. That doesn't use my strengths.
Things out early.
Right. I have other strengths. That was not it. But anyway, but he's like, what do you do? Because I'm like, well, I've done this my whole life. So it's really interesting to see, how things go. So in terms of, did I see the trajectory? I had hoped that I could continue in my involvement. But I think the most important thing about that story is that it's about service. Mm-hmm. I saw my parents in service in the groups that they were involved in leadership, be it community or other organizations. And for me, it's about giving back and service. It's fun to be in leadership. You meet lots of people, lots of networking. I have friends like you all across the country because of my involvement in APTA at the different levels. And so it was always about that servant leadership. And so I've done it, continue to, and it's a lot of fun.
So it's so funny you say that. So Shelley Weinstein, who you may know, she's in the Sports Academy. She teaches a lot of emergency response courses, and we've known her for years just through activities. And she came to Wisconsin to teach the course. And she stays with me, and we're bantering before she starts the class. And the students all look at us and say, how do you two know each other? And that's a really hard question to answer because, I say, well, we've known each other for years. Right. We've done this together and that together, and all through our professional organization. And I think for a lot of students, it's a very good example just to see that's this friendship we get back from service. And you don't think about the service is the main thing, like you talked about, but I guess all these fringe benefits of having these lifelong friends throughout the country.
Totally. Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about leadership at different levels. So you've been a leader at the state level. You've been vice president of the APTA. Tell us a little bit about those. Do those hats differ? So leading at the state versus leading at APTA National. Tell us a little bit about how those are different.
And leading in academics, because you serve on academic committees at the Ohio State University.
I have to be very honest with you all. When I first got here, I worked with a gentleman, John Rose. I don't know if y'all know John. He's a member of the Sports Academy. He teaches at Grand Valley State, but he taught at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis with us, and we recruited him down, and he and his wife both graduated from the Ohio State University PT program, and so we used to dog him because that's SEC country, right? So we used to give him such a hard time about everything Ohio State. And so when I first got here, I usually just said OSU. I kind of avoided the whole V thing. And then I learned from a PT who's a former Buckeye football player, was a part of the national championship team. He said, you know what V stands for, right? And I was like, no, arrogance. No, it's like, what does it stand for? And he's like, tradition, honor, and excellence. And when I learned that, I was like, I can say the Ohio State University. That is good. That makes sense to me. And so I understand the whole thing. But yeah, it's pretty cool. In fact, when we were in Portugal, there was a family there, and a gentleman had the on his hat, and the daughter had on an OSU Buckeye jacket. So it's like, of course, we see Buckeyes all around the world. But anyway, so the question you asked me is about how the roles differ at different levels. And had I not served at the APTA level, I wouldn't necessarily think they differed all that much, because my service at the state, at the district and the state chapter level, you're involved on the board of directors, you're making these decisions, the executive committee does its work, but the whole board does its work, and you're engaging people. But as a leader in that role, you're not just being a strategic leader, you're also doing the work and carrying out initiatives.
Yeah.
And at the orthopedic section level, it's the same thing. We have great staff at Ortho, or it's Academy. Sorry, the name's changing. But the Orthopedics Academy is same, got a great staff.
Mhm.
And they do a lot of work. But as a volunteer, you're doing the work. I've been on committees for Ortho, and the committee does the work, and then it goes to the board of directors, or the board is doing the work, or, as OP, you're writing, working with the managing editor, Sharon Klinsky, you're doing the work with the staff, but you're doing the work.
Right.
At the APTA level, that was one of the hardest things for me to get when I first got there, because I was used to implementing. I was used to doing the work of implementation. And that's not the role of the APTA board of directors. We've got 150 staff at APTA,
Mhm.
a lot of whom are PTs, others who are not, right? And we got lots of committees and task forces and groups that do the work. But as a board of directors, you're strategic. You're making decisions about things. You're integrating information. You're taking that 360 look, kind of at everything. And you're knowing if you move this piece on the chessboard, this is what happens 3 steps down the way. And so, that strategic leadership, everybody is working on strategy, don't get me wrong, but your focused role on the APTA board of directors is really that strategy and that perspective and that integration. That's part of it. The other part is, how do we connect with and engage all of our components? How do we connect and engage with our 100,000 members? How do we pull people in? How do we build the organization for the future? Not just keep going with what we've always done. How do we do those things? So that was, and it doesn't sound like it's that hard, but y'all know PTs.
It sounds really hard to
I think
me.
It sounds the view from you're talking about the view from 30,000 feet at the national level, and trying to make sure all those parts are moving together and moving forward. It's like herding cats.
Right.
Yeah.
And you also have no idea what the future holds.
Right.
From levels above you, CMS,
Yeah.
the political landscape, and all that. You have no idea. So,
right. And it's that 30,000 foot level with that feet on the ground level of detail.
That's a really
wow.
You got to integrate that feet on the ground level of information and detail. So it's, you think about briefings, right, about what's going on. We're getting that information all the time, and it's a well-oiled machine. Shifts and changes, bumps and bruises. COVID, when we decided to make the decision to build a new building and sell our old place, and COVID happened, and we had to shift how we did our work. And then when we shifted locations, we knew that there's staff that would retire or move along, because it wasn't just moving to a new building. We moved to a new building and a new culture and a new future. So you have to integrate all those pieces and really have that perspective. So the hardest part is really recognizing that you have to take your hands out of the pot of every little thing happening. And that's harder than it seems.
Yeah. So how do you feel like you got prepared for that? Was the sort of the stepping from district, state, serving in the House of Delegates? What are the pathways that can help prepare people? In addition to the things we discussed at the beginning, where there are structured, programs for people to take to move in that direction, but what experiences help prepare you for the kind of roles that you have had?
So, yes, the answer is yes to all those examples. Learning at the district and state level, I think, because you're a component of APTA, so there's that two-way communication, figuring out how to work together, figuring out as a component leader, working with other chapters and how you integrate. Maybe it's working with other chapters because they had some legislation that you want to do. So you work with them and you coordinate through APTA, right? Or you're working on this committee. I mean, luckily for me, like I got to serve on APTA Finance Committee. You know that verse, where your treasure is, so your heart is also, or whatever. I'm not getting it right, but you know what I mean.
Right.
And I should know it by heart. But anyway, when you know where the finances are, it gives you a different view of all the activities of what's happening within the organization, right? And this was a while back when I was on finance committee, so a lot of processes have changed. Things are much more integrated. But serving on a committee at APTA gave me a different perspective. That chapter leadership helped me connect and see how the pieces fit together of the organization. Serving in roles at the section level, academy level. So for ortho, because that's very different than a state chapter level.
Right.
Yeah.
The work you do is different. You're thinking national, whereas state is often focused on what your practice act says, what you're allowed to do, what you're trying to protect, all those things. And then at the section, especially academy level, I mean, we are concerned about those things and we want to support the state chapters and what they do and be the content experts, right? But you're looking broader. You're looking at that specialty area across what happens in PT nationally and internationally. So that's a different kind of leadership. And so I really believe that my work through the chapter, through the section academy, the work on committees, all those things were so helpful. I mean, I got to be a part of the task force. All of a sudden, the name is blanking out on me, but for, the one to governance task force I think I was on 3 different governance task forces across 15 or 20 years. But, again, how the organization works and being bold and being willing to be bold to say, let's look at this differently. And that one that we did, Steve Levin was the chair of that. And the first one was just looking at the House of Delegates. There are things that have happened in the last 3 years that we recommended, like in 2002. Or 2000, but people aren't ready, right? You have to throw an idea out there and then you throw it out again and then you throw it out again. And then somebody else says, oh, have you thought about this? And you're like, yeah, that's a great idea, right? That's a great idea.
Kind of like your children,
Exactly.
where you say something and they poo-poo you and then all of a sudden it's a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant idea. Yep.
Well, I have no street cred at home, right? My son broke his finger last fall and he wouldn't let me touch it. He's like, you don't know what you're doing, Mom. You just are a teacher. I'm like, I teach people how to treat the problem that you have. Give me your, I can do this. Anyway, it's pretty funny.
I love when they take the phone away from me and they go, oh.
That happened to me last week. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, between Lori and I, my husband's also a PT. We have no credibility whatsoever. One of my favorite stories is, Lori and I are older than my husband, have more years of PT experience. And we were going home for Christmas and my mother literally parted the sea of Lori and Jill and went right to David. David, I have a question for you. Because as family, we don't know anything.
Right.
But the son-in-law knows everything.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're really busy with all of this. I think we need to talk about the $1 million question of balancing these professional roles with your full-time job. So you have a full-time job as a professor at The Ohio State. Right. And I do feel better about saying the now. I feel
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm good. So we have that. We have all of your service to APTA, whether it's at the local level, the national level, and you have a family. You have a spouse, you have a partner, a spouse, Kim, and you have 2 children. So how do you manage all of this?
Well, communication's important, right? That's one of the big things because, it never fails because Kim has to travel for her work too. It never fails. I'll have my schedule out because, we know what we have to do. 90% of what we have to do is on the calendar, a year in advance or 6 months in advance. And that's not the way corporate America works. So it's like, I have the plan of when I'm going to be out of town. She's like, oh, I'm going to be gone that week too. Okay, what are we going to do to manage this? And so, you rely on friends, family, you hire people, whatever. But communication is really important in terms of how you navigate, both with your partner and with your children, I think. But I really don't think it's about balance as much as it's about integration.
Say more. Yes.
Well, nothing's ever 50-50. And if you want balance and equal, I mean, it's 50-50 on a teeter-totter, right? And that's not the way life has ever worked for me, honestly. Sometimes you're carrying the load, sometimes you're the lighter one on the top because you're doing these other things, and it's that balancing act that you have to play. And I use the term balancing act because you're trying to get somewhere to keep it off the ground, if you will, but it's really about trying to integrate what you do into your routine in a way that it's not so disruptive. I shared with you guys before the podcast, my family and I took a vacation. We went to Spain and Portugal for a couple of weeks, and I told the kids, and I was like, this is your present from my APTA service. And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, over the years, I served on the APTA board for almost 10 years, 9.5 years, because we had a term, a calendar change. But I said, these are the miles that I earned. Now, not all of them, because I've used them before, but these are the miles I earned serving on APTA and going to visit components and doing other things. And the miles paid for our airline tickets, right? So that was their gift I said, that's your APTA gift, but that's what they earned from being good to me and, being comfortable with me participating and being gone. My parents were at everything I ever did. At least my mother was at everything. I didn't go to everything. I couldn't go to everything. They were both pretty involved, but I didn't miss a lot. And always made sure somebody was there. But it's really about trying to find ways to integrate the activities. There were times when the year I got elected to APTA Board of Directors, my kids still talk about the Omni in Maryland, because that's the year I was elected at the board, at the House of Delegates, and the family came, and so they had a great time seeing DC and the area while I was working, but it was fun, right? And so they remember that, and they still talk about it. So they didn't come all the time, but they've come with me to different things, and so try to make that a part of the activity or whatever. The fact is, you're working when you're there, you're working all the time. So it's not like I see them. So Kim and the kids came and they did their thing. They just stayed in there. I saw them at night, but they got to have fun when mom was working. And I think that's, rather than just being at home and me being away. So I think that's a good way to help with that too. So, there is balance there that you try to strive for, but it's really, I think you've got to integrate. And because again, no relationship is ever 50-50.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's personal or work or volunteer or whatever. And you just have to know that, I think, and not beat yourself up about it.
Right. I think the beat yourself up about it is the hardest part for women. It's an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I discovered that, because I've always worked, right? But when we first moved to Ohio, I took a sabbatical because I'd been teaching for, 23 years, and in the clinic 5 years full time before that. And I'd never had a sabbatical, and I was tired and kind of burnt out. And we had, 2 children that were 6 and 10 years old. And so I was like, I'm not going to work immediately. There wasn't a teaching position available. And I was like, I'm taking a year. And so I was still teaching a class down in Memphis. I did some guest lecturing here at Ohio State. And in that year, I discovered, just like I did in my first role with Tennessee PT Association, is that stay-at-home mom is not me at my best.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I love my children. They love me, but that's not me at my best. And so you have to figure out what your boundaries are. And it really gave me that sense of freedom to not feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And I like that.
That's really,
that's something I would tell other women who have children at home, and it's like, don't feel bad about working.
Right.
What you got to do is find good childcare, and good childcare is the best thing ever,
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And what a great role model you are for your kids of being involved, but still being there for their activities and demonstrating that you can do both of these things and be successful, and knowing what your own personal boundaries are.
And I'm curious, now that both kids are in college.
Well, Noah starts in the fall, so yay, no more high school.
Okay, so they're on their way, young adults, and you had the example of your parents being involved. Your children see you guys involved. Do you think they're going to be the same way when they find their passion, their profession? Do you see them getting involved in service as well, because this is how they've grown up?
I don't know. Anna, my daughter, did some service stuff in high school, and was a leader in her on her volleyball team, and
Mhm.
did some of that. But remember, these are the kids of
COVID.
and
COVID.
COVID.
And
Mhm.
phones.
COVID
Yes.
and phones. And so, and I'm seeing this in our students. I'm sure y'all see it in your students as
Mhm.
well, that it's a different kind of communication. It's a different kind of
Mhm.
engagement with the world.
Yes.
And so my hope is that, yes, they'll get there. It's not going to happen for them like it did me. And I've
Right.
told both of my kids this, don't use me as an example.
Mhm.
Growing up, I always thought I was the typical person, but I wasn't. I never have been. When I look and reflect back now, I'm like, don't compare yourself to me in terms of what degrees you get or how fast you finish
Right.
something or how soon you do this or how soon you
Right.
do that.
Oh,
Everybody has a different path.
yes.
And I'm the anomaly. I'm not the typical, I'm the anomaly. So
Yeah.
just take me off the plate. And so, I can see where they might eventually, but they're not like bursting at the seams. It's not, it's not like me at that age, but it's a different time. And
Yeah.
none of my siblings, we all grew up in the same house. None of my siblings have done any of these things. Of
Isn't
course,
it interesting?
Yeah.
one of my sisters probably would have, but she passed away at 33. So she didn't really have a lot of opportunity in that regard. She had already started teaching and nursing.
Mhm.
And so I can see we would have had similar paths. But generally, you just have to wait and see
Right.
because they are their own people.
And I do think how leadership looks and things like that is very different
Hmm.
within that generation as compared to us. And there's Instagram and
Yeah.
getting information out to others in so many different means versus walking door to
Mhm.
door and asking somebody to vote, which is how
Right.
you
Right.
grew up. So
Right.
yeah, it has changed.
So given that, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges
Mhm.
for the future of our profession?
Right.
I mean, knowing, you know, what the future generations have grown up with, how can leadership mitigate any challenges that might result from that, or how can they use that to help grow our profession?
So, I thought about this a lot, having served on the board and as vice president, we've had these conversations about what's going to look like in the future and what are the biggest challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges that everybody will tell you is payment. For what we do, we needed to advance education. I mean, I had a bachelor's degree. That's my first degree in physical
Mhm.
therapy, right? And and it was the equivalent of a master's degree then, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I got my master's right after that, and it was way easier than anything I ever did in PT school, right? I mean, it just was. And so we were getting the education without the degree, so we went to the master's. And then we needed, for clinical practice, we really needed more education. So you need to get the degree that you're doing the work for. I think it's really interesting. I read something yesterday about, I mean, I was part of the Education Leadership Partnership, with ACAPTA and Academy of Leadership, Academy of Education, and all the other groups that were involved. We wrote the vision for excellence in physical therapy education. And we talked then, and we continue to talk now about this idea of how can we shorten the time it takes to become a clinician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My PT program was 19 months long.
Mhm.
That's what it was.
Mhm.
And sometimes we went Saturdays. We were definitely 8 to 5. There were lots of things we did and to get in and out. And we learned a lot. But there's so much more to learn now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the expectation of how you manage a patient is different now than it was,
Yes.
right? So I think the degree is right, but the pay doesn't go along with it.
Right.
And when you see some of these other professions who kind of like, frankly, PAs that kind of jumped above us. But
Mhm.
people are like, why don't we get paid like PAs? Well, we don't work under the direction and supervision of a physician, for one,
Mhm.
right? And going back under a physician is it's a non-starter.
Non-starter.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you're new coming in, like nurse practitioner, PA, it was a new kind of profession, right? And so
Mhm.
you can start at a different place. We've been around for a long time, so
Right.
it's just like when somebody gets promoted from inside or you hire somebody from outside, the
Right.
person who got hired from outside is probably going to make more money,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So we gotta figure out payment, and it's not just about salaries that PTs make, although that is what I'm talking about here. It's about how physical therapists get paid, and we know how important the work is. There's evidence out there. Certainly, the economic value of physical therapy report that
Yeah.
APTA
Yes.
put out
Yes.
in 23
Mhm.
is when it actually came out in that October of 23. It shows the benefit for not just the patient, but the whole system and the
Right.
cost savings down the road. And what I tell people is, it's not that you're going to spend more money on therapy. We're talking about spending more money on therapy. We're talking about saving the system. So you're going to spend less money on healthcare, but more money on therapy. And so, getting that mind shift and that change and figuring out how we get paid, I think it's really important to figure that out. So I think that's one of the things that's going to be really important for the future of our profession and to grow our profession. I think I'll tell you that newer therapists, frankly, sometimes are better at setting boundaries than we are. And, and about, this is when I'm willing to work, and this is when this is what I want to do. And there has to be a balance in that too. Right. But, good for them. Right. That they can say no.
Right.
I think it's hard for some of us to learn that. I mean, I've tried to learn it over time to say, yeah, no, that won't quite work for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think payment is the biggest issue we got to figure out. Student debt, frankly, there's not a lot we can do about that.
Right.
I love that the association and delegates are very interested in reducing student debt. I'm interested in reducing student debt. I've been on a couple different task forces related to it. I'm sure you all, I know we have talked about what can we do to reduce costs, but the fact of the matter is we got to run a school.
Right.
And we're a school. We're not an independent school. Excuse me. We're a school within a university, and we don't get to set the price.
Right. Well, and the other thing we've looked at, and you guys probably have too, Susan, is there any way we can condense the curriculum or anything like that? And so, we've talked about that, and we just don't feel comfortable, even shaving a semester off to save a little bit of money for the students. And you have to consider the return on the investment, the concern about the product you're putting out, things like that.
Right. But it's difficult as the content, the knowledge requirements increase. So I served on the prescriptive authority task force, and we talked about, medication, ordering medications, labs, imaging, DME, all those things. Well, if you require that as part of the curriculum, your curriculum's going to expand.
It becomes robust, very robust.
Something has to give. So it's something that really is going to require some leadership to figure out how this moves forward.
Right.
And, I think all of us would like to quit teaching some modalities, but the fact of the matter is they're on the board exam. Yeah. So it's not like you can't not teach them, right? So that's always an interesting thing too.
No longer a 4-credit semester class, and it's condensed to this. And now we've expanded things like manual therapy. So, we're following the evidence with what we teach, which is
Exactly. So it's a very small part, but we got to make sure we hit the bases. But yeah, I think those are some of the big things that have to happen. Like one of the things that we've done that we negotiated for, and I'll shout out to Dr. John Buford, our program director, because he really went to battle on this, is that that once you start, this is I think it's starting this year, if not next year, but it got approved to hold tuition. So when you come in, the tuition is the same throughout the whole program. It wasn't that way before, and we've also changing the rules related to out-of-state stuff to try to reduce that cost to some degree. So, we're working on ways that we can manage things differently. But, we didn't have a tuition increase for a while after COVID. And so, but you have to keep your doors open and keep your people working and have enough faculty and staff and all those things. But so how we get paid as clinicians, but and how we pay our staff, right? I think that's it. And I think figuring out how to optimize the educational program in a way that doesn't add increased burden, recognizing that we don't have control over that. The federal government's talking about reducing loans available to graduate students, which is crazy as can be. But it's like, what's going on there and how, I don't know. We got to figure out how to make it happen. But I think what we all have to remember, certainly us as educators, because what it looks like when that student comes in the first day, or when they come and interview with you and they're just so excited and they just can't wait. And they get to their first clinical and it's like, I'm out of that classroom. This is why I want to be a PT, right? So we've got to make sure that is a message that keeps coming through loud and clear. The patient stories, but also our stories and how rewarding a career physical therapy is, and the payback that we get, that it's, it's not measurable in ways that we often measure.
Right.
It's an intangible thing.
Right.
100%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
Hey, can I say one thing about a path to leadership? We talked a little bit about that.
That's actually my next question.
Oh, well, then I'll wait.
If you have advice for someone who's starting out and they want to get on a leadership path, what's your advice? What would you tell Susan Appling, new graduate, as the secretary of your district in Tennessee?
What I would say is be a member of APTA, your state chapter, but also what's your specialty area and join the academy or section. And if any of the other ones are free, join them. And if you ever remotely think you might want to be a private practitioner, the Private Practice Academy, I'm a member. I didn't join for many, many years because I thought it was just for private practice people. But it's not. And the information that you learn is, I used it in my clinical practice, and we used it when we were doing our faculty practice. I've used it in my teaching. It's worth it. Now, it's hard to be a member of everything because it costs money, right? Especially when you first graduate. But definitely APTA and whatever specialty academy you want. And if any of them have really low or free membership, join. Mostly that's for students. So I encourage students to join every free section.
Yep, absolutely.
So be a member. That's the first thing. Volunteer, raise your hand and step in. 2, if somebody asks you, say yes.
That's a great one. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So those are 3 things in terms of leadership. And 4, remember, it's a process. You're not going to be president the first day.
Yep, exactly. I remember that early on in my career of never saying no. Like, even if I didn't really know what it was about, I knew I could figure it out, or I knew who to go to help me. So just because it might be something that's slightly outside your comfort zone, that's how you continue to learn and grow once you're out of school. There are people who will mentor you. There are people who will help you. So don't be afraid to step in, to lean into that area that might be a little uncomfortable for you.
And the other thing I think students or young new grads always feel is, I don't have anything to contribute. And I think nothing could be further from the truth. Because as we talked about, if we look at, the generations of physical therapists within our association, we've all learned so differently. And so to have their perspective, I think, is really important. So I always feel somebody has something to contribute.
Yeah.
And if we don't have their voices, we make all kinds of assumptions that might be dead on, but are probably out in left field.
Exactly.
At least half the
Spot
time.
on.
Yep.
And so, you've got to ask. And when I want to clarify, when I said raise your hand, I meant raise your hand, knock on the door, open the door and walk in. Don't wait to be asked. When you're asked, say yes, but don't wait to be asked, because honestly, that's the other thing I've learned, that, at the component level in particular, always looking for volunteers.
Yeah.
We're always looking for people to help and do things. And so don't wait to, raise your hand, open the door, knock on it, whatever, but volunteer, but also say yes. So those 2 things are not exactly the same, right? But don't wait, because as you said, as both of you said, you definitely have something to offer.
Right.
And mostly it's passion and caring.
Yep.
And everything else you can learn.
Right. And so to bring it back to the conversation early on about Shelley Weinstein, that's how you start meeting people. You raise your hand, you walk in, you meet some people, and all of a sudden that web gets really big, and you're over here, and then you're meeting somebody here and here and here, and that's how you know people for 25 years.
Right. Connections, resources, those resources.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Somebody asked me once, they're like, how do you know that person, or how do you do this person, or why does your employer let you miss so many days to go volunteer? And I was like, well, I know people because of my engagement, and you stay connected and you do things with them. I said, but my employer values it. Because you know what? I got an email last night, so I need to ask you two both about this later. I got an email last night from a former student that says, "Hey, do you know anybody in Madison, Wisconsin? Because it looks like I'm headed that way, and I really am interested in working in the hospital system." And
Oh,
and yeah, and I have students, from Tennessee and here. They're like, my wife and I want to move to the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
Do you know anybody? And or they want to start a clinical, right? And
Yep.
Right.
PT schools are always looking for clinical education sites, right? And the connections that you have,
Right.
be it for your students to when they're working or doing a clinical, or with research connections, to do multi-center research stuff, or working as a partner with someone. I mean, honestly, I think every paper I've been on and worked on in the last 5 years have been with people at other universities, right? And
Yeah.
they're people I know either from my direct teaching or I know from APTA. So my APTA engagement, when I say APTA, I mean all of it, right? At any level. But the value is not just to you personally. Those connections are important as an individual. But it's not just a value to you personally. It's a value to your employer. It's a value to your patients because you stay on top of things. You have information that you wouldn't otherwise have. You can help people navigate insurance or this or that,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 100%.
Awesome.
Well,
So let me say that one more thing about the pathways. I just have to
yes,
tell you
please.
this story. So you guys at the very beginning, you talked about some of the leadership pathways that ABTA has, including the Leadership Scholars Program, LAMP, and ACAP's Leadership Compass program that they have. Well, I will tell you, did you know that the Leadership Scholarship Program grew out of the APTA Centennial Celebration? And
No.
yeah, when we were planning the Centennial, I happen to be chair of the Centennial committee. And when we were planning the whole process, we spent about 4 years working on this. But one of the emphasis we had was on making sure that we could give back to the profession. And how could we do that? And we didn't want to just look back on what had happened in the past 100 years, but we wanted to help shape the future and set a path and kind of build a foundation for that next 100 years, right? And so we started the Centennial Scholars Program. That's what came out of it. We had 100 scholars from chapters and sections and academies, and they did projects, and it could be on lots of different things, but a lot of it was on leadership and engagement. And so it evolved into the Leadership Scholars Program, much more manageable now with 25. We have 5 mentors, and they each have 5 in the cohort of the scholars. And, I'll just give a shout out again to Caroline Brunst, who she was the scholar that Ohio OPTA sponsored, and her project was really related to new professionals and starting this leadership program for new professionals, which happened. Right. It happened. And they just, at our spring meeting, she and the current new professional chair kind of presented on it, how it evolved and how it got there. And so, lots of things come from different places. And so that Leadership Academy is great, but it started with ABTA Centennial process.
I love
Awesome.
it. It's a great story.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And thanks for spending this last bit of time with us. Anything else that you want to add, or we've covered a lot of territory here?
We have. I will just say, I'm going to reiterate maybe 3 things. Leadership, servant leadership is what's really important from my perspective. You hear transformational leadership and you hear all these different things. I teach a class on leadership here at OSU, but really that servant piece is where I think that's so important, because then your motivation is to help.
Right.
In whatever area that it's in for others. And that's where, honestly, it makes the work easier and the rewards are greater for everyone, including yourself. So servant leadership, think about that. 2, volunteer. Don't wait to be asked, but if you're asked, say yes. 3, recognizing that you're building your own future and the future of your profession or the organization that you're volunteering for, and in that leadership role, and it's not just about what you get from it, but what I'm seeing on this side of leadership, having finished my term at APTA, this is the first year since 1996 that I will not have a role in the APTA House of Delegates. Wow. I'm not even gonna get to go this year, but
I'll miss you.
First time since 1996. And so what I'm seeing on this side of leadership is about helping to steer and be strategic and guiding, but leadership is also mentorship and sponsoring
Mhm.
and bringing people with you and helping to launch the next group or the next person. Let them find their passion and help them get connected to do that. And I had a student this spring who did. We have a what we call it as a practicum. So it's I can't remember if it's 6 or 8 weeks. It's 8 weeks. Anyway, doesn't matter how many weeks it is. It's this thing we do in an area of specialty. It can be clinical practice, it can be management, it can be all kinds of things. And we had a couple of students really interested in advocacy, and they both worked with our state chapter. One also worked with the state legislator, and the other worked at APTA for part of the time. And I was just really grateful that I could help. Them make those connections and be able to do that work. So I think our responsibility as leaders, when you are a leader, your responsibility is to make sure you help build the next group of leaders.
Right. Right.
Perfect.
Yeah. I think it's important to know when to kind of exit off the stage and be the dance mom in the side, cheering and helping people and pushing other people on stage.
Yep.
So
Perfect. That's a great
But
way.
remember, it's not a dichotomy. It's not just you and then
Correct.
helping them. It's bringing them all along.
Correct.
Right.
The herd. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Susan, for this
You're
time.
welcome.
It's been
It's been
wonderful.
fun.
So, and if we do need a middle sister,
Yeah,
you're it.
you're in.
I can do it. I can do it.
Susan.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.